Good evening, my fellow weirdos. Yes, I am diminished in my energy. um, been a long week. Last Saturday, 6 days ago, I had gone to a protest and didn't expect to go to one last night, but I got a call last minute. I got your ride there and I'm getting you one back. You want to go? To the Visibility Bridge. I usually, for something like that, if I'm going to be a couple hours on my feet or something, that's a big thing when you have a foot injury, a chronic foot thing. But I wasn't about to say no. Not a chance. Not to get to a protest. So, because I was in the middle of something and I had not saved my foot. It cramped up. I sat on the sidewalk, the whole thing. But it was okay because it was energizing. But again, this morning, I had to get up because I had to go to the food bank, the monthly farmer's market. And I did need some produce, so I went. And it was longer than normal because there was 2 of us that the caseworker was taking. And I'm actually physically tired because I sat on the sidewalk. I put my bag that I had my signs in, took the signs out, and sat on the bag. But when you've got remember I'm 62. When you've got a bad foot, you try to get up from the floor, from the ground, without using the one foot. You just can only use one foot to get up off the floor. You think it's easy because you don't realize, but you need both your feet, and you press up on the ball of your foot, like when you're doing stairs, when you're doing, like on one side when you're going up and on the other side when you're going down. That's why I have to do stairs the way I do, because I can't put even momentarily all the weight on the ball of the foot, because every bone was broken in the foot. Some of them were pulverized, and bone dust is what they called it. And I wasn't able to keep any of the pins or screws in that normally keep things from shifting over time, because my foot kept pushing them out, pushed pins out, and covered screws over with bone, which is not good either. You can't have that. My body just either tried to cover it up or push it out. It doesn't like shit implanted in my body, apparently. And so it shifts every few years. So I have to walk differently again. And it gets on your back, and you get these cramps where it's on the front and the back of your leg, up the calf and the shin, all the way up to your groin on both sides of your leg. So if you flex your foot to stop one muscle from spazzing, the other one starts. So when you push your toe forward, then the other one starts. It's like the calf starts. It's not good. And being it was impromptu, I forgot to take a pain med, and trying to get up, there isn't any room, and I wound up with a huge cramp, not just in the calf, but it went down to the foot and the toes, and on the back of my thigh. It started going up, and I'm like, oh my god, it was really hurting. But I was damned if I was gonna fucking cry out and pick, fuck that. I know they wouldn't be, because everybody would be like, oh, how we'll help you. I didn't want anybody to. Y'all can't do it anyway. You could just stand there and just catch me if I did, if I don't get up the first time. You know what I'm saying? So why worry everybody? Next time I know that a walker, you can bring it, and that'll solve the problem. But that's one of the reasons why I'm just so exhausted. It was impromptu. I knew I was going to the farmer's market this morning, But it was just so impromptu that I had already used up my quota for the day of pushing my foot and my back too far. It's not the will. It's sometimes your foot, your muscle just says, "No, I'm done." You can positive think all you fucking want. I ain't supporting you right now. And anybody that's got like chronic issues or something, y'all know what I'm talking about. Sometimes it's not your willpower. Sometimes you could be like, oh come on, I could do one more, and your buddy's going, well, I hope you can do it without me, because I'm not coming along this time. So it's kind of that moment. And I just, oh man, I was just glad I got home. And the last protest also, the last 15 minutes I was in the sun, the whole hour and 40 minutes, whatever it was. And it was hot and humid, very humid last Saturday. So this weekend, I'm sure something's going on, but you know what? Judy's sitting this weekend out. This weekend, finishing my housework. I got some more garbage now to get out, but get some weeding done. I got to plant my milkweed for the monarch butterflies and the catnip. I didn't try to do it today because I was just so. The thing is, when you're so exhausted, I'll tell you one of the things that I was sitting on the ground, so for the people driving by to be able to see my sign, you're driving, you can't be looking down, you know? So I was holding it way up over my head for the whole hour and 40 minutes. Most of it. Sometimes I'd have it down, but you know, holding it up like that and twisting for one way, the traffic the other way, all that time, you get a good core workout from it. You gotta, I might be sitting, but I was still twisting away, man. I didn't realize it until this morning. I'm like, oh, I felt it a little last night and like the shoulders and shit, you know, and back. But I didn't think. But you know, by like the delts, and you're just like, oh, this morning I was like, oh, it kind of almost felt like it used to when I would work out when I was in corrections and I'd go to the gym, you know, several times a week. It almost felt like, yeah, I do weightlifting and swimming. And of course, yeah, I gotta hit the sun after that and just be like, oh. But yeah, so I'm like, ooh, side benefit. And that matters to somebody like me because of the foot issue, I can't do like aerobics or any kind of shit like that because my balance is fucked up because of the foot. And I can't do those things. Aerobics, I can't put that on the foot. The foot is lucky that it walks. It ain't going to be jumping and hopping. It ain't happening. You know? And bicycling, what do you pedal with? The proper way? The ball of your foot. People say, why can't you do that pedaling thing at home? You still have to use the ball of your foot. If you use the arch of your foot, you're not doing it properly, and you're not doing the exercise properly. So what's the effing point? You know? I'm just kind of letting you know things from my perspective because unless you have a differently abled body, some of these things it doesn't occur to you. The everyday challenges of having this or like somebody that with oxygen. I'm sure there are things that we would not think would be a whole procedure just to do, and I'll bet you there are things that you wouldn't think would be like, you should just be able to go and do, and they probably have to do certain things before then. And I get that. There have been things that I was like, oh, now I understand. why it took so long. I mean, I understood that they were hurt, but now I understand why that other part. Oh, okay, I get it now. So, just letting you know, sometimes you see somebody there, but you have no idea what they had to go through. When I'm at a protest, it's not just the physical stuff afterwards. I don't have a vehicle because of the foot, and I have to just like beg just to get rides to them sometimes. And then it's the time there, and then it's you're tired. It's just a lot for somebody. 20 years ago, before the accident, I would have been not a problem. I'm going to pop over to a protest, and I'm going to go and do this and this before bed. And yeah, in about 4 days from now, I'm going to pop over just a couple hours and, protest there. And then I've got to go to this meeting. That's the way I used to be before this fucking accident. And the accident happened just before I got pregnant with the twins. If that helps coincide. And on the 1st of September is the fourth spiritversary of one of those twins. No, he didn't get to turn 16 before he had to run ahead. But, man, I was so ADHD. We called it hyperactive, before they called things ADHD. And I know when I only had my first one, I would be like helping him, checking on him in the midst of making dinner, and while it was doing whatever it needed to do, I was finishing using the weed eater out on the lawn, and in between that I was going to check on him, but then I also made a phone call. I mean, that was a typical day for me, typical moment for me. I was just all the time, people would have said to me, I'm exhausted just watching you. And there's times I say that to other people now. I'm like, I used to be like that. I get what they said. People would say, I'm tired just watching you. And now I get it, because I'm watching you and you're like the way I used to be. And God, I'm exhausted watching you. You just, damn, I'm exhausted. So, it all comes full circle somewhere, doesn't it? Interesting little irony there. So anyway, I will be either tonight or this weekend starting behind bars, the other side, the correction officer side. Working behind bars, not doing time behind bars. Although some of you, I wouldn't doubt or thinking, I'm sure she's been behind bars before. Well, I have 10 years, but as a corrections officer, not as an inmate. So just to kick that off, you got to go, at least this was in Arizona, back, like I said, like 20-something years ago, 30 years ago. 30. I was in my 30s. And we had, back in Arizona, you had 3 months of Correctional Officer Training Academy, which is called CODA, Correctional Officer Training Academy. At that time, the cops didn't have their own academy. They're called ALETA, Arizona Law Enforcement Training Academy, because it wasn't just the police officers. It was sheriffs, it was border patrol, it was any kind of law enforcement stuff, because prison officers, correction officers are considered law enforcement. They're part of law enforcement. And I guess firefighting is part, you know, they used to, when the first chat groups first came out, we had like the law enforcement, first responder kind of groups, because, and that included, we have a lot of interaction with medical, and medical, police, sheriff, all those people, corrections officers, all those kind of jobs, firefighters, we all use 10 codes, and they're different from state to state, by the way. The 10 codes in Arizona are not the same as here in Jersey. A 1022 means something totally different. I actually remember, I used to have a card. I wonder whatever happened to that. Of the 10 codes. I still have my pins. I think I still have. I'll dig them out. My expert marksman pin. Well, pins. And my name tag. Don't have my badge, obviously. You got to turn that in. They didn't have their own academy, the cops. So they actually trained on the same field we ran on, were timed on. They used the same equipment. They were timed on the same procedures. We had to know everything they did, except they had 6 months of training. And that's because they had like 3 months of laws. Now, we got laws, but we didn't need to know all of them like they do. We got pressure points, we learned. Same thing they learned. We had, this, like I said, you had to, at the end, you had to, well, first of all, you had to qualify at a certain level with, just to get in, for hand grip, hand strength, and sit-ups, push-ups. You had to be able to do at least one pull-up, like if you had to pull yourself up something, get over something. I mean, you had to be able to do at least one, you know. You had to run 1.5 miles within a certain time period, and it was gauged for male and female and for ages, because it matters. It does, you know. And that was with all of them, and they all do that. Because younger people should be able to perform better than somebody 20 years older. I mean, they should be able to. You know, when you're younger, you get some of those tougher things, but as you get older, you give those to the younger ones now. You know, that's just the way it is. There are some things that you really do need somebody who's quick, and not always, but often it's the younger people, you know? I mean, you're going to send a 60-year-old guy or a 31-year-old guy to go chase somebody. Unless the 60-year-old is a retired freaking marathon runner, you ain't going to send him first. Or you shouldn't be. Unless your supervisor really, really hates that guy. Yeah, I don't think you want to be work for someone like that. But, yeah, so they got their own academy across the road out in the desert, from actually the Tucson prison. The correctional academy, the correctional officer training academy, was in Tucson also, but it was up in the foothilly area, kind of like out in the deserty, but in the foothilly area. They were down the prison, and thus the training academy for the cops across from the prison complex is on a flat area in Tucson. So, but like I said, I didn't have to dorm there. I could commute because I lived in Tucson. But if you lived more than X amount of miles from the training academy, you had to live there for those 3 months. And you were allowed to leave on weekends, but you had rules to follow. So since I was in Tucson, because I wouldn't have been able, to do that. And you had to learn basic life support. You had to learn, and that's on adult, child, and infant, because you might be working visitation sometimes. You had to know the Heimlich on all three. You had to, like basic life support, like how to treat seizures, how to treat overheating, of course, Arizona, how to treat frostbite, how to treat just all kinds of things like that. Bites, snake bites, burns, all those kinds of things. You saw seizures a lot, that you had to hang with the inmate, from an inmate, and you had to kind of call the medical people, and just kind of, you weren't allowed to touch them, so the medical people are. And so you had to just stand there, and just make sure they didn't hurt themselves, but as an officer, you couldn't help them. And when somebody's got a medical thing, at that point, they're a fucking person, and they're probably a little scared. And it was hard to just, like, act like you don't care. Because you can't do anything per your job, So, and I get why, but sometimes it would take 10 or 15 minutes for them to get to the yard. I'm just like, I could have been helping him by now because I knew what to do, but I can't do it. That was a frustrating part. Not everybody's in there for, like, rape and murder and child molestation. Okay, not everybody is in there for that. A lot of them were in Arizona were bullshit marijuana shit charges. Remember, we're talking 20 years ago. And, and I was no inmate lover, but there were definitely, and you don't normally know their cases because you're supposed to be fair, firm, and unbiased and consistent. And it's kind of hard if, somebody murdered, you know what I mean? So, but sometimes there's inmates that will tell you what they're in for. And so you can't help but, like, freaking know sometimes what somebody's in for. And, or sometimes word gets around that they called them chomos. It's child molester. And that's a death sentence. Because even inmates have standards. And rapists and child molesters and traffickers are worse than murderers to the inmates. They're worse. Because they don't just kill their victim. The victim has to live the rest of their life in torment with living with that. And touching women and touching children is just not acceptable in a lot of cultures. In Mexican cultures, that's like if their mama and their aunties found that out, girl, you're in trouble. And there was, at least in the prisons, there were black gangs, and yeah, they were the same way. Everybody, they would prefer to bunk with a murderer, somebody who, like, manslaughtered or, somebody, as opposed to somebody who's a rapist or a child molester or child or a sex trafficker. They're like, no, I can't abide by that. So if you didn't know that, let that sink in. They consider that worse than a murderer. And I remember one time we had a shitload of move-ons. I mean, we had like 200 moving off the yards and 200 coming in from another complex hours away. I'm like, and we found out, I mean, because you don't understand, you have to count, you have to go through and list and write down all of their inventory, everything they own, and size and number. for every single one. And for everyone coming in, you have to go through and make sure it's all with the inmate. That's a lot. That's a lot of work. And you gotta do it in your session. You can't just let them, oh, we'll finish the rest tomorrow. Where the hell are they gonna, you have to get them in their fucking bunks. You can't put them in unless you're counting the inventory. I mean, the ones that graveyard had to finish, it was a hell of a lot. But what had happened was there were several inmates throughout the state. The other inmates were on the verge of or had found out that particular ones were child molesters or rapists, and they were setting a hit on them. So they put those people in these these tight. It's a holding cell. It's like cells are small enough. It's like maybe a quarter size. I mean, really, there's only room to sit and piss. I mean, literally. I mean, for real. And that's only for movements until we have time to do the inventory, to get him in and stuff, or until that other inmate is out of the cell he's going into. You get what that's. So we had found out through word of mouth that because there was a bunch of, it had been let out, they had compiled the inmates, the chomos and the rapists, and across the state in different units, they were putting hits on them, and we don't have enough holding cell. You got to do something. So they had to move and switch things around, and like 5 months later, it happened again. And I was on a different yard at that time, and they could see that that wasn't going to work. So what they did was they picked one of the units up in the Iman complex, and we called it Chomo Central. But they didn't want everybody to know, because everybody would know that all of them were in this place. So while all the movement was happening, it's not as secure as you can imagine. And so the word had to be kept very, very quiet that they were all being rearranged. So what we did was they moved them all around from that complex, from all the way up by Phoenix down to, back and all around places. And then like a week later, they did it again. Some of the guys that were moved the first time were moved, some weren't. Then they did it a third time 2 weeks later. And that third time is where all the child molesters wound up ending up. We called it Chomo Central. I don't know if it's still like that, but that's when I was there, when I was working with them. So they were just playing, Ring Around the Rosie kind of thing, musical chairs to try to keep track of all of their, first and second and third and, that type of thing, all their contacts and stuff. So first they're at Riding. Wait, now they're at Echo. Wait, what are they doing over there, in Central? Wait, huh? Yeah. And that's kind of so we had like 6-8 weeks of just, oh God, I hope I'm off on we called it the Great Migration at first. And afterwards some of us called it the Chomo. They were kind of rude. The Chomo Migration. I know. But it was like a lot of fucking work. And you still have to do chow time. You still have to feed them. You still have to do all this other shit. That was just on top of your normal duties. The yard still is open. You still have to be out there. You still have to be giving passes for school, and you're just doing that as well. Yeah. And there was always mandatory overtime. For years, there was mandatory overtime. Gee, nobody wanted to work all that for 12 bucks an hour. Imagine that. Go figure. Yes, that's what we were making. We were making on overtime 16 something an hour. Ooh. People's lives were in our hands. And our co-workers' lives were in our hands. And that's, yes, it was 20 years ago, but for working a dangerous job like that, 13 bucks an hour is like 12 bucks an hour or something, like 11 something, I don't know, something. It was like not cool, because it was a right to work state. You had people that would work for cheaper, so you know, and that's why they had so many problems, because they didn't care if seasoned officers left and got fed up. They would just hire two new people, two greenhorns, for the price of the one seasoned officer. But when shit goes down, they don't call them riots, they call them incidences. So we don't dismay the public. Tucson Prison Complex had an incident today, as opposed to Tucson Prison Complex had a riot today and 3 people escaped. People are like, huh? Right? It sounds a lot more palatable if you say Tucson Prison Complex had an incident and it's under control and they're just finishing up the procedures, which means trying to capture the people that got out. Okay. Changing the wording doesn't change what happened, but okay. Yeah. And every time you wrote a ticket, you had to write an incident. Every time there was searches and something was found, you had to write an incident. Every time you found something or somebody did something or you heard something, you got to write an incident report. So if you write people up for giving tats, there's at least 2 of them. So that's 2 tickets and 2 incident reports for each one. That's on top of everything else. And that's just for one tattoo. God forbid there's an incident. You want to know how much paperwork is up your ass after something like that? Yeah. Entire carpools are late going home. Yeah. Ain't we got fun? I'll go this weekend also and see if I can find some of those pins. I know I kept my kids' scout stuff. I have his pin things, his uniform. But I know I must have saved mine when I moved here. I must have. But I was in a little bit of a... Because halfway through my packing is when I got word of my son collapsing on the... And probably not going to make it. And I had to finish packing. Not even... unpacking was a hell on earth, to be honest with you. Because half the stuff I didn't even know what the fuck I packed it in, because I was just so... I was so in shock. I don't even remember packing this. Unpacking, I'm just all, just kind of in a surreal daze. It just, and it just goes on and on. So, I think I remember seeing them. I'm just not sure if in that daze, you know, sometimes when you're feeling like that stuff you really do want to keep, you're like, fuck this shit, right? It's a visceral reaction, anger at your kid going and you still being here. Yeah. So I don't know if I've sorry, I thought I could mention him and not tear up, but if you don't know, September 1st is his 4th spirit anniversary. It's just And then 2 weeks later, or 6 weeks later, is the twins' birthday. So he didn't get to see his 16th birthday to celebrate it with his twin. But that's why that stuff was more important. About his older sibling, to keep that stuff. But I'm pretty sure something like that. I think I saw that. I just have to figure out which box it was. But yeah, we had to also every year go to the range, and absolutely on handgun and shotgun, because shotguns are in the perimeter trucks. But the only time you have to do rifle is if you're working in a unit that has yard towers. If you have to work in a tower, then you're gonna have a shotgun, a handgun, and there'll be a rifle up there. So you have to be able to work it. So everybody, if you work in a unit with a tower, you have to know how to work in the 50-foot towers. Oh, that was a way to solve quite a bit of my fear of heights. For real. The first day I was assigned to a tower, I didn't want to admit that I was afraid of heights. And trying to go in the door and walking up the stairs, it was taking me forever to relieve the guy. And when I got up there, I'm like, I'm really sorry, but I'm just gonna tell you right now, I am terrified of heights. And this is not exactly my comfort zone. And he started laughing. He goes, oh, well, wasn't this a good position for you? I wound up being out there quite a bit for a while, which probably means I did a good job, I didn't do a bad job. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep putting you there. That's kind of an important position, just like the working perimeter. It's boring as fuck, but you're the last defense for anybody breaking in or breaking out, dudes. That's not a light job, but boring as fuck. And that's the problem, because you never know. Just when you start getting too comfortable is when something's going to happen. So you have to be ready always. Even if you spend 32 shifts in a row ready to freaking puke just for some excitement, it's going to be that next day when you let your guard down. That shit'll happen. So you can't do that. Yeah, I got over my fear of heights pretty quick doing that. And with that, I am going to stop, and that's just a little bit of what I'll be talking about. So if you got any questions to ask, things you wanted to know, I mean, it might be different from Arizona to whatever state, but there's a basic idea of the same. Same thing with voting, with polling places. They all have there are certain things that every state does this the same. But they do have play with some things. It's not going to affect a vote, per se. It's just some allow photos to be taken, some don't. Some allow you to take a photo of your ballot if you want to. Some don't. Some let you take photos but not in the booth. Yeah. New Jersey, you can't take photos at all once you're online. That's it. No photos. But yeah, it's kind of the same thing with the prisons. They work kind of the same, but there are differences. But anyway, I am going to go kick back, get something to eat. Oh, I have some ribs already made, sauce. I can just heat those puppies up. Ooh, put those in the toaster oven. Crisp those puppies up. Ooh, that sounds good. I forgot about those because I've been so busy. Guess who's having ribs tonight? You guys have a lovely, wonderful, peaceful, non-confrontational Friday night. And I plan to be nowhere but here all weekend. My cats are like, who are you? I got back today, they were all like, if they had watches, they would do that. But they kind of like, she's home. Yeah, I got dissed by my cats this morning. Well, when I got home, it was about 12:30 or so. Maybe 1. Yeah, they gave me the cold shoulder. They were like, hey, got anything? Because they decimated the catnip that was delivered last night. I gotta plant that. And once they saw it was just all vegetables and fruit in the bags, they went, So I gotta make nice to raspy and smudge the next 2 days. But it was actually in the 60s. It was chilly last night. It was down to the 60s. And I know what that's from. It's from Erin. That storm Erin that came in over the Atlantic, slammed into the Jersey coast last night or yesterday. I'm sure that's what's bringing that cold air from over the ocean. It's just, I don't know if you saw pictures of that the other day, but Storm Erin, I mean, there was no eye. I mean, it was like a big fluffy spiral, and there was no open eye. It was like, whoa. I've never, except in a movie or something, I've never seen those, like the from space things looks, you know? That looked like one of the disaster movies, like, what was that one, that New York, everything freezes? I'm sure it's Erin, but it was very cool today too. So enjoy your weekend. We're probably not going to have, at least out here, anybody that's been affected by Erin is probably going to have a little cooler weather for a short time, but we'll probably pay for it in spades afterwards. So enjoy, be safe. I'm going to chill tonight.